Hello, YouTube people. Let's see. We are going to get started now. Hopefully, everything is working. If it is and you can hear me, let me know. I would love to hear and make sure. And wow, isn't that amazing? Just as I am getting started, my phone buzzes. And, okay, no problems. No problems at all. Just making sure that everything's okay. Hate for something to go crazy. It's been a crazy week. How about you? We've got school starting up here. We've got some trying to think through how do we reboot children's ministry and things like that. All the kinds of things that come with I something that I keep smiling about was when I heard a pastor say once heard a pastor say, I just wanted to tell people that their sins were forgiven. I just wanted to tell people that their sins were forgiven, and they made me an administrator, and they made me a boss, and they made me a CEO of a very, very small company. And I'm not complaining. Like, God be praised for the responsibilities that He's given me, for the responsibilities that He's given those around me, for that He's given to my fellow elders around me. And so anyway, I'm not here to complain, but I'm here to ask how everyone's doing. Let me see here. Make sure that I'm not just shouting into the void here. We do have, a couple of people tuning in, and so welcome to you. As we get started today, we have been, of course, going through the Ten Commandments. That's kind of been my bag that I've been focusing on these things. I love talking about the Ten Commandments because the Ten Commandments cover everything. And today we're going to be talking about the ninth commandment. And when I say we, I really do mean we. So if you have a YouTube account, you can put something in the chat and I will read it. And I will probably talk about it. Now, I want to be clear about this, that the chat doesn't go in. I mean, it's not immediately. So we have on YouTube, there's what's called latency, which is essentially a time delay. So there's the time that I say something, and then the time that takes to get through YouTube's wires and computers and pipes or whatever, and then it gets to you. And so by the time it gets to you, there's a delay of, I'd say, about maybe 15 seconds, 20 seconds, something like that. Something in that ballpark anyway. And so I probably won't respond to it right away, because by the time you've heard it, and then you make a comment on it, and then you send the comment on it, and then I read it from where I'm standing, some time has already passed, but that's okay. So never be afraid of chiming in or commenting on something. Now, of course, my technology is not really working right now, and it's not telling me if there are any viewers. So that's okay though. I'll just keep shouting into the wilderness if I have to. But I hope that everyone is well. I hope that we are in a phase, not a phase, but we're in a place with all the stuff going around in the world today, where we're just tired, and we've reached a point where we are ready to move on, ready to get back into normal patterns, I think. And of course, you're like, well, we've always been like that. We've always been ready to do that. Yeah, but you cross a line at a certain point where it's like, I don't care about the consequences. And I'm not saying that's good. I'm just saying that is. It just is. That's just the reality. And yeah, but that's not what we're here to talk about today. We're here to talk about the ninth commandment. So, the ninth commandment is, thou shalt not bear false witness against thy neighbor. Okay? At least one viewer here. Thanks, Mary. So the ninth commandment, if I can, it's going to be weird to kind of put it this way, but the reason I started this whole series was to get to the ninth commandment, because in a way it's kind of my favorite one to talk about. In a way, I think for our day, it's the most important one. Now, I mean, you could certainly argue. Obviously, the first commandment is the big one, and I'm going to take that for granted, because every violation of commandments 2 through 10 is in some way a violation of commandment 1. You could certainly argue that in our day, given the riots and the desire for the destruction of authority, like just outright, naked, unashamed destruction of authority, the fifth commandment could certainly use a reawakening. You could argue that because if you've ever been on Twitter, then you know the sixth commandment could use some help. That is some help in getting replanted into people's mind about not hating our neighbor, not wanting them dead even. I've seen some of that on Twitter. Lord have mercy. You could argue that in light of the sexual revolution, that the seventh commandment about adultery is particularly imperative for us today, and all those things are true. But for me, just kind of day to day, what I see in people's lives, whether it be real life or on social media, because social media is not real life, whether it's real life or it's on social media, the ninth commandment is the one that gets broken the most because we don't think about it, because we have a very nuanced definition of lying, which is itself a way of lying. There's some irony for you. That even the way we often even lie in the way we talk about lying. And so I'm going to try real hard not to do that today and not to carry that any further. But let's then talk about the ninth commandment, because the ninth commandment has to do with so much more. As we've seen every commandment, you've got this baseline reality that it's teaching. And that baseline reality extends out to a whole bunch of other things, right? So I said with the seventh commandment about adultery, what's the baseline reality? You have a body, and God cares how you use it. Baseline reality of the sixth commandment and murder. You have neighbors, and God cares how you treat them, and God cares what you do with their lives. Yeah. So what do we do with the ninth commandment? The ninth commandment means that you have a mouth. Yeah. You have a mouth, and how you use your mouth matters. Okay, you have a tongue, you talk, and your speech matters. So this is dealing with so much more than just, if you happen to be in court, make sure that you don't perjure yourself. Yeah, so much more than that. So let's talk about it. The ninth commandment is really all about what you do with your words. And if you think for a moment about how much that matters, how has God revealed himself to us? Okay. He has not given us a series of paintings or a curated display at a museum to reveal himself. If he had, then the most important commandment would be about sight and how we use our eyes, and that is important, but the most important thing would be about sight and how we use our eyes and how we study things with our vision. If God had given us a song, then the most important thing would be learning how to sing and making sure that we get our melodies and harmonies right. Okay, but God didn't give us an art gallery, and he didn't give us a song. I mean, okay, yes, Book of Psalms, I already hear you. But God gave us a book. We call it the Bible. God gave us words, and in fact, Jesus himself, in John 1, he's called the Word, right? The Word became flesh and dwelt among us, made his dwelling among us, tabernacled among us. And so we, as Christians, are word people. We care about our words. We care about words in general. And it's why Christians build schools. Because if we are book people, we want to teach other people how to read so they can be people of the book too. Right? So one of the most godly vocations in the world is teaching people how to read, because you're giving them access to God's words. So then let's talk about words. What are the duties required in the ninth commandment? The duties required in the ninth commandment, are the preserving and promoting of truth between man and man. Okay? So I know that sentence isn't finished yet, but that's where we're starting. That as a Christian, living in obedience to the ninth commandment, so far as it depends on me, and when I fail, the Lord forgives my sins. But part of my aim in life is to promote truth between man and man, and that includes, of course, man and woman, woman and woman. Our language has been so butchered in the last few decades that we have to make clarifications like that. But yeah, so when I say man and when I say mankind, I am not excluding women. For most of human history, we've been intelligent enough to know that. We have recently lost a degree of that intelligence. Sometimes I think we're evolving in reverse. Different talk for a different time. Let's see. Promoting of truth between man and man, and the good name of our neighbor as well as our own. Okay? So promoting what is true between people, and giving a care about my neighbor's reputation as well as my own reputation. This has not performed well in our modern context, right? How often have you heard this? I don't care what people think of me. If you're a Christian, you ought not say that. When Jesus is talking about how we live and when we're persecuted in the Sermon on the Mount, he talks about the times when people are going to see your good works and glorify your Father who's in heaven. I think it's 1 Peter. I'd have to go hunting. I don't have it right in front of me, but I believe it's in 1 Peter, where Peter talks about don't even live your life in such a way so that those who mock you and slander you and lie about you on the last day when all accounts are settled, it's going to be revealed that they were lying about everything. And furthermore, Peter says, in essence, keep a good reputation so that outsiders will have a right sense of what Christians are about. And so God cares about our reputation. When I think about, so I've got this poster in my office that has the portion from 1 Timothy 3, the qualifications for elders, because I'm an elder in the church, and so that reminds me every time I look at this poster that's in my office. I can't really turn the camera so you can see it, but it's got all the qualifications for elders. And so just to run through those real quick: to be above reproach, to be sober-minded, to be not violent, to be hospitable, self-controlled, not quarrelsome, able to teach, not a new convert. Do you know what the next one is? Thought well of by outsiders. There's your reputation there. Respectable is also in there. So worthy of respect. So God cares about our reputation. And so part of the 9th commandment about bearing true witness and not false witness is about caring about our reputation. So take a moment and think, what are the ways in which we've lived life which, I don't care what people think of me? You should. You ought to. Now, there's another side of that coin, isn't there? Where you can become enslaved to the maintenance of other people's opinions of you. And you're constantly doing maintenance on an image that you are projecting so that people think the things that you want them to think. That is not what we're talking about here. Rather, what we're talking about here is an attitude. It's a particular kind of attitude that says, I'm going to do what I want, even if other people think that looks selfish or sinful or self-focused or stuff like that. So I know what this looks like, but I don't care because I want it. That's different from, listen, I'm saying listen like I can look you in the eye. Sorry, it's a preacher habit. That's different from I'm going to do what I want and I don't care about the consequences, which is different from, I'm going to do what I want and I don't care about consequences, which is different from I don't care, I'm going to do what I want, I don't care if it's right or wrong. Yeah. So when somebody says, I'm going to do this because it's right and I don't care about the consequences to my reputation, that can be a very good thing if what you're engaged in is good and godly. Yeah. And at that point, it's perfectly fine to say, I don't care how this might affect my reputation, I'm obeying God. Okay? I'm sure you can see, that's completely different from, this is what I want, so I'm going to do it, no matter what anybody else thinks. Okay? So, good name of our neighbor as well as our own. And again, did you ever reflect upon how it's your job to defend your neighbor? So don't bear false witness. Here's what that means, okay? Just to give an example. So let's say that a grandmother asks her grandson, let's say they're out at a ball game and she lives a mile away, they were able to go to this ball game together, and she realizes she's forgotten something at the house, and he's in town visiting her, they're having a good time, and she says, I need you to run home and get my medicine and a bottle of water. And here are the keys. You kind of have to jiggle the lock a bit. It's kind of fussy or rusty or whatever. And so he goes back to the house and kind of has to jiggle the lock to get in. Meanwhile, her neighbor across the street is watching him. And all her neighbor knows is some stranger, some dude, it looks like he's breaking into her house. I saw him kind of jiggling the lock, and it looks like he's, breaking into her house, right? And then let's say, I suppose for this story to be believable, the next thing she would do is call the police. All right. But if every time she saw that man around town after that, regardless of what happened in the next, in the next couple of hours, every time she saw that man around town, she would say, I saw him break into her house. He's a thief, right? That's lying. Now, my point is, and I didn't make the best analogy, my point is, what if you lie, but the lie is based on some pretty decent evidence, but it's still a lie? Like, you don't know it's a lie. Everything you've seen leads you to this very reasonable conclusion, but it's still a lie. Is that still sinful? The answer is yes, because you're still bearing witness that is false. And that's going to be kind of the ground we're going to stand on for a lot of this Ninth Commandment stuff. So part of my idea here that I want to encourage you toward, don't say things if you don't know them to be true. And if you say things and it turns out that you were wrong, it turns out you were bearing false witness, you didn't know it, perfectly innocent even, that's still your sin to own. Bobby says he can't see me. Okay, well, I hope the rest of you can see me. Let me see. Gonna check here. Just do a couple of things. Okay. Well, it says I've got a solid connection, Bobby. My encouragement would be to refresh your screen and see if that works. But anyway, so let's start moving, or we're never going to get anywhere on this one. The good name of our neighbor as well as our own, appearing and standing for the truth. Hi, Lane. And from the heart, sincerely, freely, clearly, and fully speaking the truth. Okay? Could that point be belabored anymore? Christians are to be truth speakers. Okay? So the idea here, and I think the rest of the Bible supports this, because we know from our Bibles that God himself is truth. That's why we believe his words, by the way. And again, so God tells us that he is the truth. Jesus says, I am the way, the truth, and the life. Yeah? And by the truth there, way, the truth, and the life, he doesn't just mean I am the true thing to be believed. He also means that everything that I claim for myself is truth, and I determine what is true. That's what Jesus is saying there. And so, do you see how important it is that we be carriers of the truth? And I firmly believe that the Lord desires that Christians would carry this reputation among our neighbors. How do you what's the defining thing about if you meet a Muslim family? Well, it's going to be probably in part how they dress, right? Or the length of the beard, or maybe I'm thinking Orthodox Jew as well, length of the beard. I mean, you can see an Orthodox Jew coming, right? Because of the way he dresses and keeps himself. Same thing with a Mormon. Assuming it's a Mormon missionary on his 2-year mission, there's going to be a white shirt and a little name tag, and you see that, and you know Mormon, right? Because that's the image associated with the reputation. What is that for Christians? The answer is that we should have the reputation in our communities, in our cities, in our places of work, where, oh, you're a Christian. Oh, that means I can believe what you say. And can you imagine if this were true of us, more true of us? If atheists went around saying, I can't stand Christians, they're, maybe they're bigoted, or maybe they're backwards thinking, maybe they think like people in the ancient times, and they haven't caught up with the present, but you can trust them. I'll say that for them. You can trust them. And that should be part of, but what does that mean? Trust them about what? Well, let's talk more about that. Speaking the truth fully, sincerely, freely, and only the truth in matters of judgment and justice, and in all other things whatsoever. So what do we tell the truth about? Everything. And everything means everything. A charitable esteem of our neighbors. Oh, this is where it's going to get so good, y'all. Pay attention. A charitable esteem of our neighbors, loving, desiring, and rejoicing in their good name, sorrowing for and covering of their infirmities, freely acknowledging of their gifts and graces, defending their innocence, and a ready receiving of a good report and an unwillingness to admit an evil report concerning them. What's the point of that? Well, let's unpack it individually by the clauses. Let me go back up here. Okay. A charitable esteem of our neighbors, which means that wherever you're gifted, whatever you're good at, whatever your strengths are, whatever your virtues are, that's what I'm going to spend more time talking about. And we don't do this, do we? We know people by their failures. If you don't believe me, listen in on a conversation when somebody forgets who somebody else is talking about, right? So yeah, have you heard from Jimmy recently? Jimmy? Jimmy who? Oh, you know, Jimmy, the guy who's married to the redhead. No. 2 kids. No. He lives in Lafayette. No, I'm not thinking of. Okay, you know, the alcoholic who ran his car into that tree. Oh, Jimmy. It's like we're so inclined to know people by their failures, by their shortcomings, by their hang-ups, by their bad habits, by their addictions, by the kind of dark history part of their life. And so here we have a charitable esteem of our neighbors, loving, desiring, and rejoicing in their good name, sorrowing for and covering their infirmities. Okay? The people that you're closest to, you know all their weaknesses, don't you? You know their sin habits. You know the stuff that they're terrible at. You know the stuff that will make them sin, whether stuff that will make them angry, stuff that will make them anxious, you know, all these kinds of things. You know their triggers, you know their sinful patterns, you know their hearts, depending on how close you are to them. And so when you talk about others, do you make every effort to cover their shortcomings? Or is that what you use to define them? And if I can put it this way, usually I can talk about this among friends. I've never talked about it live on a YouTube before, but look, I think often women struggle with this more than men in some ways, right? So I noticed this when I was teaching high school, that if a guy was in a bad way, maybe not living in a godly life, making some really bad decisions. Maybe he was part of a group of guys, and maybe they couldn't stand his behavior anymore, so you hadn't seen him around so much. And you ask, hey, where's I'll use Jim again. Apparently, I'm picking on people named Jim today. Where's Jim? Have you guys seen him? And maybe it gets real quiet, and the guy's like, he's struggling. He's struggling. He's having a difficult time, right? Whereas if you're in a group of girls and you're like, hey, I haven't seen Susie around. Is anybody, where's Susie? You get, oh, skank. And they've got a story about something Susie did. That's, of course, a broad kind of stereotype. But I think that I think that more often than not, men get embarrassed about the failings of other men, whereas as women, maybe not so much. And that's just one example of this. Men can have their own shortcomings in this regard in a lot of ways, in terms of being honest, being genuine, maybe being vulnerable even is part of being honest, isn't it? So let's see, where was I? Freely acknowledging their gifts and gifts. So covering their infirmities. So think about the person that annoys you. Maybe they annoyed you today. Maybe they annoyed you this week. When you talk about them, do you tend to lean toward talking about the stuff they do that annoys you? That's because of your sinful nature. It makes you feel good to point out the infirmities of others. And what we're called to as Christians is to cover the infirmities of others. Again, I'm not talking about pretending. And what I mean by that is I'm not saying that we never talk about or be realistic about the sins of other people. But I am saying that unless there's something you can do about it, unless you have a way of confronting them, unless you have a way of helping them, Confessing other people's sins for them when they're not around, we call that gossip. And so now let me address this. Because if you're really sharp, you're wondering right now, well, wait a minute, I thought we were talking about the ninth commandment. Okay? So let me go back to my example with Susie. Like, what if Susie really is misbehaving? What if Susie really is promiscuous, and somebody says that about her? Aren't they speaking the truth? Perhaps. Perhaps is as much as I'm willing to give you there. But is that the full picture of who she is? Or is that simply a present struggle that she's in? Is that the full picture of who she is? Because that is what you are communicating when that's all you talk about. And you'd be lying about her in that regard. Sorrowing for and covering over there and sorrowing for. Whereas confessing them out to other people, you're, if we're honest, sometimes almost rejoicing in them. Freely acknowledging their gifts and graces. So the people that you would talk bad about, do you know how to, what I call good gossip behind their back? And oh, that we would do more of that. Just when somebody's not around, you just talk about their gifts. Talk about what they're good at. Talk about how they've blessed you. Things like that. Defending their innocency, that is their innocence. Okay? Again, so this gets into, let's say I think that a friend of mine is getting into trouble like more and more with the law. Now, do I know that for sure? Let's say that I don't. Okay? And so if somebody comes and asks me how he is, what am I going to do? Am I going to vent to them and say, well, to be honest, and that's just demonic right there. Well, to be honest, and what you really mean is I'm just going to give you an unfiltered version of what's in my head, which is, biblically speaking, not the same as honesty. Our modern definition of honesty, which is often unguarded communication, is not, like, we need to find a new word for that, because that's not the same as being honest. And so if I say, well, I'm just being honest, but I think he's getting into big trouble with the law or whatever. If I don't know that for a fact, then I'm breaking the ninth commandment. Rather, I should be inclined to say, he's running into some trouble. I think he's, try it. If there's a way for you to positively spin something about your neighbor and still be honest about it, then do that. You want to be giving good reports about your neighbors so often as it depends on you. So yeah, that's what we got. And it's a ready receiving of a good report. Now that, I got an example for this one. A ready receiving of a good report, okay? Twitter is not the place to go for this. Twitter's the place to go if you want to read a bad report about somebody. So here's the example. Let's say on Twitter there was a CNN news article or whatever, and all the CNN article says is, let's say Trump donates $2 million to help fight human trafficking. And then read the comments underneath it. You're going to see a lot of, yeah, but, and da-da-da, and, or let's say, actually, unfortunately, things being what they are, take the other presidential candidate right now, Joe Biden, and same thing. Gives $2 million to fight human trafficking. Maybe he should. You're just going to see a lot of trashing. Christians should be the ones to say, you know what? Praise God. And let that be enough. Let that be enough. Especially if you hate the guy who just gave the money. Let that be enough. And man, is that gonna that's just, to us, it's like politically boring. It's socially boring. Because we want to take a chunk out of somebody. Especially somebody we hate. But gladly receiving a good report about somebody or what they've done, no matter what you think of them. An unwillingness to admit an evil report concerning them. Right? Now that doesn't mean, I wouldn't say that means you never receive an evil report about them. It means you don't believe an evil report or receive an evil report about somebody unless you know, with a capital K, unless you know that it's true. And let yourself be found a fool rather than damage the reputation of your neighbor. What I mean is that if there are evil reports coming in about somebody, evil rumors, evil words coming in about somebody, and their evil, sinful behavior, I'm going to choose not to believe them until I know it. Even if the result is that at the end of that, somebody gets in my face and says, don't you feel stupid now? Don't you feel naive? Don't you feel fooled? Right? All of us knew what was going on and you wouldn't believe it until you had proof. And all of us were right. Don't you feel stupid? Christians, we should be more ready to endure that than some kind of obsession with being right about everything we think about people. Discouraging, so this applies to the people around you, discouraging talebearers, right? I've got a story for you. Flatterers, okay, because flattery is a form of lying, and slanderers. Actually, flattery and slander are kind of the same thing, just two sides of the same coin. Love and care of our own good name and defending it when need requireth, okay? So you are allowed to defend your reputation if it's been slandered. Not indignantly, I would say. You want to be careful about things like that. So it's like, how dare you try to say that I'm that way? I'm so high. I'm so good. You don't even know. I've always been doing the right thing. I've always been a person of integrity. I've always kept everything clean. That's the wrong way to go. Although it is kind of interesting that at times in the book of Job, it does seem like that is his argument, doesn't it? That's worth some thought, isn't it? So yeah. So if you're confident, again, if you're confident that it's true that's true of you and what's being said about you is a lie, then say that. But it's okay to defend your own reputation, but not to do so arrogantly or pridefully. Because this is why. Because let's be honest. If somebody says trash about you, whatever they think of you and whatever they're saying about you and whatever kind of sins they ascribe to you, can we be honest and say you're probably worse? You're probably worse than whatever report they're giving. And so you want to keep both of those in balance. Like on one of them, it's like, I want the truth to be known about who I am. And then on the other side, you're like, but not like the whole truth about who I am. And so take that into consideration when it comes to defending your own reputation. Keeping of lawful promises, studying and practicing of whatsoever things are true, honest, lovely, and of good report. All right, so let me stop here and say, how do you think, based on this little exploration so far, how do you think we violate the 9th commandment today? I'd be interested to hear that from you. So it doesn't have to be right this second, be at any point in the broadcast today. How do you think we violate the 9th commandment? I'm going to mention one to you right now, just to break in between these two. And that is conspiracy theories. Yeah? So conspiracy theories are not, by their design, are not meant to make a clear argument that you can disagree with. That's not what conspiracy theories do. They do not make an argument that X is true. What they do is provide enough lines of evidence to make you doubt that it's not true. Very big difference. Very big difference between saying like, see, this is true. Like, look, sky is blue. Like, look up, here's the evidence, here's the proof, boom. Whereas what a conspiracy theory tends to do is it says it's just trying to create enough doubt in your heart that it's not true. You doubt that it's not true, which is a totally backwards way of reasoning. And then we take that doubt that it's not true and transform it into this must be true. Or I've seen this one on Facebook too. You probably have as well. Somebody posts something about some latest conspiracy theory and they say, I'm not saying that I agree with it. I just think it's interesting. Don't do that. Here's why. It sounds genuine. It sounds like you're kind of just trying to be helpful or honest or whatever. But what you are doing is provoking people to establish what is true in these ways. To establish what is true by whatever creates enough doubt in their heart. And so it's something where we can't talk about what's true anymore because all we're doing is doing a well, yeah, maybe, and then followed by a well, says you. But this is what conspiracy theories do. Now, if you've talked to somebody who perhaps embraces a conspiracy theory or two, their response might be, well, what are you going to do if this turns out to be true one day? And won't you look silly, right? And man, how much does that motivate in terms of our actions? Won't you look silly? Can I just remind you that we worship a guy that was dead for 3 days and then got up out of the grave? How much, especially during that 3 days, could you slide into the, or even after the 3 days, even after the 40 days where he's walking around, it's the man, won't you look silly if this gets revealed to be not true? So just be very careful about that. That's an extremely powerful, but I think dishonest way of arguing. Just to say, well, no, like until I see what's true, I'm not going to share something that I think that is meant to provoke, not meant to actually educate and reveal truth. So that's what conspiracy theories do. It's an attempt to create doubt in the mind, not an attempt to verify something is true. And as Christians, we should be people of the truth. Now, why? Let me ask you this. Why do you think, and I'd be interested in your answers, why do you think conspiracy theories are so attractive? Like, why do you think that people are attracted to discussing conspiracy theories, to sharing them on Facebook or on Twitter or whatever? And there are, different kinds of answers we could give to that. I think at least one of them is it feels good to be the one in the know, so that you can call everybody else a fool. I think in some sense we are afraid of being fooled. It's like we really do. We're afraid of being taken in. We're afraid of being trampled upon. We're afraid of being taken advantage of. We're afraid of all the things that happened to Jesus happening to us. Something to think about there. All I'm saying there is that if you get stepped on or taken advantage of, that's hardly the worst thing that could happen to you. Look at what happened to Jesus. And if we follow after a Savior who got stepped on and taken advantage of, we have to at least confess that that's not the worst thing that could ever happen to us. The worst thing that could ever happen to us is that is if we live in a way that makes being right more valuable to us than following Jesus or looking humble. Because if you actually live the Christian life, you're going to get taken advantage of. Yeah. You're going to get stepped on. So yeah, something to think about. So that's I wanted to talk about that. That's the attraction of conspiracy theories, that they make us feel powerful and they guard us from what we think is the worst fate of all, which is being taken in. Because we're scared to trust people, I guess. But in the meanwhile, I also think, actually, that's what I wanted to talk about. I think there's also a tendency within conspiracy theories. Conspiracy theories are very attractive to people who are bored with the Bible. Let me explain what I mean. God has given us his revelation in Scripture. He's told us this is what you need to know and believe. And if we get bored with that, then what we do is we try to start looking into the secret counsels of God. And we start trying to figure out what God's whole plan for our life is, even though God has never promised to reveal that to us. We start trying to peer into the future counsels of God, even though he's never promised to give us that information. And some people really live as though they have God's future plan for them figured out, when God's never promised to reveal that. But if you do, then why wouldn't it also be part of your job to figure out Satan's plan? If you believe you can discern God's plan when he hasn't promised it to you, if you believe that you can read the book of Revelation and figure out everything that's going in our world today, even though God has not promised that to you, then why wouldn't you also say, well, yeah, I can probably crack the code and read the enemy's battlefield notes as well and figure out what he's doing? That's the attraction of conspiracy theories. All right, so with that, what are the sins forbidden in the ninth commandment? The sins forbidden in the ninth commandment are all prejudicing the truth, okay? So only believing the truth that benefits you, especially in public judicature. So in other words, favoring some people over others, especially in public justice. Do I even need to say much more about that given our situation today? Right? So, if you say everyone in Black Lives Matter, for instance, is a raving Marxist, you are lying. There's no question about that. Stop lying. If you say every police officer is evil, you are lying. And you will be judged for that, right? We're told in the scriptures that on the last day, it's every careless word that falls under judgment. That's how important words are. That's why I think the ninth commandment is especially important. And so prejudicing the truth, and it's interesting, prejudicing the truth in the good name of our neighbors as well as our own. And if we look at the text for that, especially in the public judicature. Yes, Leviticus 19:15. You shall do no injustice in court. You shall not be partial to the poor or defer to the great. But in righteousness you shall judge your neighbor. You shall not go around as a slanderer among your people, and you shall not stand up against the life of your neighbor. I am Yahweh. Look at this next one. You shall not hate your brother in your heart, but you shall reason frankly with your neighbor, lest you incur sin because of him. Notice how the thing that's contrasted there in verse 17 is hating your brother in your heart and not being able to reason with him. Right? So why is it that there's so much unreasonableness going around today? I even saw something about on Twitter how like demanding that we use logic and reasoning and objective truth is a sign of I think it was like white supremacy. That's utter madness. Like there's just no I don't have any time for that. That's silly. That's just silly, and I'm not going to sort of counsel that or give that any time other than to say it's just silly. But notice, like, hatred in your heart is what makes you unreasonable. Hatred in your heart is what makes you refuse to reason. Hatred in your heart is what makes you burn down buildings. Okay? It's hatred. It's hatred that results in a failure to reason. And this verse 15, you shall not be partial to the poor or defer to the great. Okay? So this whole idea that if there's an imbalance in justice, we have to overcorrect in order to get a balance back is a lie. It's a violation of the ninth commandment. That's not justice. If there's an imbalance in justice, you correct it, period. You don't overcorrect it in the name of justice. Okay? That would be like killing in the name of life going on. We do that with babies. Anyway, so this is just, again, this is why I think the ninth commandment is particularly important for us today. So let's go back to it. Giving false evidence, okay, obviously. Suborning, that means bringing in false witnesses. Wittingly appearing and pleading for an evil cause. So pleading for an evil cause, and you know it's an evil cause, and you show up and defend it. Outfacing and overbearing the truth. Oh my goodness. Did y'all know that was in here? Outfacing and overbearing the truth. Do you know what that means? That means giving a detailed list of your neighbor's sins, and every word of it is true. I mean, you really go into detail about it. You really cover all there is to say about this jerk. Outfacing and overbearing the truth. So when you bear witness, or when you bear false witness, what does that mean? It means you're lying. It means you are telling what you have witnessed, what you believe to be true. And so bearing false witness, bringing in false witness. So what does this mean then? bringing in too much of the truth, as it were. And you've got to have some wisdom. And so what this means for us today, again, how often have you heard somebody say it? Well, I'm just telling the truth. I'm just being honest. I'm just being real. I'm just telling it like it is. In many, many cases, when people use that kind of language, it's because they're overbearing the truth and they know it. They're overbearing the truth and they know it. So we have to have wisdom in just how much we share, because you can overbear the truth in the name of slandering your neighbor. This is that being slow to receive an evil report, covering over their infirmities, covering over their sins, as long as that doesn't mean sweeping stuff under the rug. That's different. But how much delight do we take in trash talking people? And I had to deal with this myself, in my own heart recently. I had some conversations with people that were really hard. And some of those people really let me have it in those conversations, really told me ways that that they were displeased with some of the things I had done, and they were mad about it. And I had to wrestle over the next few days with saying stuff like, or with whether or not to say stuff like, well, they despised me, or they hated the job that I was doing, or said that I had failed in everything. And none of that's true. None of that's true. It is honestly, genuinely how I felt at some points. But it actually isn't true of what they said. And that's the distinction we often fail to make today. Passing unjust sentence, calling evil good and good evil. Hello, sexual revolution. That's the easiest example. A lot of evil gets called good under the banner of, well, it's how I feel or it's what I desire. Talking about if somebody says they want to put an end to abortion, and somebody says, well, that's evil because you don't care about women. It's like, well, no, you just took something evil and called it good. You just took something good and called it evil. Rewarding the wicked according to the work of the righteous. Okay? Rewarding the wicked according to the work of the righteous, and the righteous according to the work of the wicked. Same kind of thing as calling good evil and evil good. This just has to do with your relationships. So to go back to an earlier example, if somebody refuses to get on the proverbial train with you, and won't take up with you a lie. If my friend's going to a protest or whatever, and I won't go with them, and I say it's because I'm not convinced that I know what this protest stands for. I'm not convinced that I know the truth of what they're saying, and they're saying, well, we're pretty much done then, or whatever. Our friendship is over because you won't join me in this. Well, that would be somebody's trying to be righteous. Somebody's trying to be discerning in what they are doing, and you are punishing them for it. Again, these examples are all off the top of my head. Concealing the truth, undue silence in a just cause. Yeah, we talk about that a lot today, don't we? Concealing the truth or undue silence in a just cause, which means Christians should speak up for just causes wherever there are just causes. However, what happens a lot today is that the people leading just causes don't care enough to speak clearly about the argument for the just cause. They don't care enough to speak clearly about why it's a just cause. They simply try to stir up the emotions. But wherever a just cause is present, it's wrong to be unduly silent. Notice I didn't say it's wrong to be silent. I said it's wrong to be unduly silent. Silent for too long. Silent when it really becomes bad. Or really, really becomes good. Holding our peace when iniquity calleth for either a reproof from ourselves or a complaint to others, right? So here's the balance. Here's the balance. Yes, you should defend your neighbor's reputation. Yes, you should hold back from the tendency to always trash your neighbor. But that doesn't mean holding your peace, holding your silence when the time comes for what you know to be true to be confronted. Okay? Complaint about speaking the truth unseasonably, so there's a time for everything. Have a care for when you speak truth. So maybe an example of this would be Sherlock. If you've ever watched the Sherlock series on BBC, excellent series with Benedict Cumberbatch and I think the guy that played Bilbo. I can't remember his name. Anyway, Sherlock in that series speaks the truth unseasonably quite a lot. He says something that is true, but at a time where it's not kind, not generous, not helpful, not respectful, all these kinds of things. And so speaking the truth, like when you say something and how you say it matters, maliciously to a wrong end. So telling the truth because you know it's going to result in pain for somebody else. Perverting it to a wrong meaning, doubtful and equivocal expressions. Doubtful and equivocal expressions. Yeah. So that's when you say something that can be taken two ways. One of them is a lie. You know it was taken that way, but it benefits you. So you keep your mouth shut. Speaking untruth, lying, slandering, backbiting, detracting, tale-bearing, bearing a false narrative, bearing a false story. There's so much of that today, isn't there? So much of that today. Let me tell you what's really going on. Let me tell you how this really happened. Whispering, scoffing, reviling, rash, harsh, and partial censuring. So only covering up the parts that benefit you, or that don't benefit you, rather. Covering up the parts of a story that make you look bad, and only telling the parts that make the other person look bad. Misconstruing intentions, words, and actions. Misconstruing intentions, words, and actions. And people wonder why a lot of Christians say that intention matters in conversations about sin. Intention does matter. So do words, and so do actions. All three matter at once. And a lot of the frustration today about social justice tends to not even actions, but results of actions is what tends to be the focus of a lot of social justice stuff today. So like you have somebody who's not given to a particular kind of evil or hatred, but their actions have unintentional results and consequences, and so that means they do carry that evil. Well, no. Intentions, words, and actions. All three matter in measuring what a person does and how they act and who they are. Let's see. Flattering, vainglorious boasting, thinking or speaking too highly or too meanly of ourselves or others. That one's a tough one for me. Self-deprecating humor is kind of my wheelhouse. I enjoy it. But it's, unless I'm saying things that are actually true and helpful. Self-deprecating is still often a matter of pride. I know that sounds weird, right? But it's still a way of saying, hey, everybody, look at me, pity me, feel sorry for me. And that's why, even though there's a time and a place for friends to joke about each other in that way, you know, with self-deprecating humor or with humor that's kind of insulting, like, you know, if you're really close with somebody, you can bounce that kind of humor back and forth, and that's great fun. But your real friends are the ones who, when you say, I am just worthless, they will fight you on that. No, you're not. And they'll fight you on it. Or they'll agree with you to the extent that, well, I mean, what do you mean? If you mean that if you mean that your work doesn't make you good, well, yeah, then it's worthless in that sense. But if you mean that your work doesn't help your neighbor, let me tell you a story about how it's helped me, or something like that. All right. So let me just tell you, we've got about 5 minutes left, and so I'm going to start wrapping it up here. But if there are any kind of closing questions or comments, now would be the time to get them in, because I've got 5 minutes, and then I've got to roll. Well, let's see. Aggravating smaller faults, hiding, excusing, or extenuating of sins. When called to a free confession, oh man, hiding, excusing, or extenuating of sins. We're very quick to excuse our sins because they look very small to us, while the sins of others look very big. Unnecessary discovering of infirmities. Man, the language here just stabs me. Unnecessary discovering of infirmities. And I don't know what to say about this one or what kind of example to give. But, you know, maybe a good one would be, let's say you know that somebody in your life, maybe you haven't talked to them in a while, But you're pretty sure they've kind of gone down a bad road in recent years or whatever, or in recent months. And so you jump onto their Facebook profile just to skim through things and make sure that you're right. And then, oh my God, oh, is that the sort of person they are now? Oh my gosh, look at this. Oh, I can't believe they said that. Oh, look at that picture. I can't believe she's dressed that way. Oh man, I can't. Look at these people that he's hanging out with. Unnecessary discovering of infirmities. And we justify it. Well, I'm just checking on them. I just want to see how they're doing. Yeah, sure. Raising false rumors, receiving and countenancing evil reports, stopping our ears against just defense, evil suspicion. Evil suspicion. There's something for the present nonsense. Evil suspicion. So every time Fauci opens his mouth, evil suspicion. Anyway, envying or grieving at the deserved credit of any. This goes back to my example with Trump and Biden. Envying or grieving at the deserved. Oh, I'm really sad that they've done a good thing. Now I can't hate them as much. Endeavoring or desiring to impair it. Rejoicing in their disgrace and infamy. That is Facebook and Twitter in a nutshell. Rejoicing in their disgrace and infamy. Rejoicing in their sin because it lets you hate them more. We don't even have time, y'all. But that's just rampant everywhere. Man, now I get to be vindicated. Now I get to tell you how much of an idiot that guy really is. Scornful contempt, fond admiration, breach of lawful promises, neglecting such things as are of good report, and practicing or not, avoiding ourselves, or not hindering what we can in others, such things as procure an ill name. So that's the ninth commandment. That's the ninth commandment. And you see how it goes. It's so much bigger than like, don't tell a lie when you know you're telling a lie. It's at least that. But the way that I like to put it is, and this is language I've actually borrowed from Martin Luther, that you take what your neighbor has done, or you take the story you hear about your neighbor, and you try to put the best construction on it until you can't. That is what we should all be doing. Because then we are the sorts of people that will, that a lost and broken world will want to be friends with. I mean, don't you want to be friends with someone who, if they heard a bad report of you, would try to put the best spin on it or the best construction they could for your sake until they couldn't anymore? Those are the people that I want as my friends. Really. Then when they hear a bad report of me, they'll go, that can't be. There's got to be a reasonable explanation. Maybe he was, fill in the blank with whatever kind of possible explanation that would be a good spin on it. Aren't those the kind of friends that you want? And the idea is that those are the sort of people that Christians should be. That we should be the ones putting the best spin on things to love our neighbors, even our authorities, political candidate authorities, whatever. But we're in such a hurry to make sure that we have evil reports on the evil people and good reports on the good people. So this is what I see a lot of on Twitter. You have, for instance, just to use Donald Trump, you have Trump supporters who only want to tell the good reports wherever they can find them. And then you have Trump detractors or I don't know, haters, not supporters, opposition, who only want to hear and spread the evil reports. That is a violation of the ninth commandment. Mary says, what about delaying to hear a bad report if it could hurt somebody? Delaying to hear a bad report if it could hurt. I'm sorry, Mary, I'm not following the question there. So can you say just a bit more about that? What about delaying? So you could hear a bad report and you tell them to stop because if they tell you it could hurt somebody, or if you don't tell them to stop, it could hurt somebody. That's what I'm not quite following. And by the way, Mary, I saw you on Sunday. I'm sorry that I didn't say hi. But it was good to see, half your face with the mask on. Yeah. So anyway, but so these are things that we could stand to really learn from in terms of how we speak about our neighbors. And again, if the worst charge against you is that you're maybe a little naive for always wanting to think the best of people, there are a lot worse things that you could be charged with in this world in terms of sin and failure and hatred of your neighbor. A lot worse things. But let me just in terms of Mary's question. Oh, and sorry, that's what I almost forgot. The reason why we talk about this, right, is because our Lord Jesus is the way, the truth, and the life. And so because God is truth, his people care about truth. Because we want to be able to continually speak the truth to one another. Truths like your sins are forgiven by Jesus' blood. And we want to be able to rest in that comfort, in that biblical comfort we're going to give each other. That our communities, Christian communities, aka churches, would be places where truth reigns, not where unguarded and careless speech reigns. Yeah. I think, Mary, I think I'm trying to put the best construction on your question. Delaying to hear a bad report if it could hurt somebody. And so if I can maybe sketch out a possibility here that somebody wants to tell you something bad about somebody else, and you know that bad report could be hurtful to them, that's kind of where I'm not clear. I mean, obviously in that case, it's perfectly okay if you sense gossip is coming. Now, what do you do in a situation like that? Maybe that's what you're asking. What do you do in a situation if you're talking to somebody and you know that gossip is coming? A great thing to do is, like, let's say you're talking about Jimmy and you say, yeah, I just talked to Jimmy recently. Actually, if we're going to talk about this, why don't we call him and put him on speakerphone? I mean, it's a little passive aggressive, I suppose. But what that does is it starts to build your reputation as somebody who doesn't talk about people behind their backs. And that's a reputation that you want to endure. And so, Mary, I'm not sure if that answers your question, but that's it's kind of how I'm understanding it. Maybe you mean, like not wanting to believe it too early. The bad report. Yeah, that's good. I would say that's good. You shouldn't want to believe it too early. The bad report about them, and I would say. Certainly based on my understanding of what our confession, what our catechism's getting at here, and in part also as well, in a bigger sense, what the scriptures are getting at here, is that, again, if the worst thing that can happen is that it turns out to be true and you believed it too late, that's okay. I think that's an easier thing to bear than I carried around a false report about them and it turned out not to be true, and it really hurt them, even more so if it hurt them. But yes, it's okay to not want to believe it too early until you know that it's true. And I'm sure part of the difficulty here is we could multiply examples of what ifs. And so I'm speaking in terms of general principles. So it is generally true that it is good to avoid believing an evil report too early. Okay? You could make an argument, well, what if somebody's just really naive? And they just really are looking at somebody through rose-colored glasses and don't want to believe the negative. That's possible. I think that's a far better failure than the failure of being really quick to believe a false report. So the way that I practice this is that if somebody gives me an evil report of someone and that's not my experience, I don't believe it until the other person demonstrates it to me. So like if I know, Jimmy, and somebody comes to me and says, "You're friends with Jimmy?" I mean, he's really just kind of rude. He's short with people, and maybe he's or then today, maybe he's a sexist or a racist or whatnot. if I haven't seen those things in Jimmy, I'm not going to believe that report until I see them. And I'm not going to treat Jimmy as if those things are true until he shows me that they are true. Okay. Mary says, say you hear something about a person that could potentially hurt somebody, but you don't want to assume the worst or slander them if it's not true. Oh, you mean not hurt the person that's being talked about, but hurt somebody else. Yeah, that's a tough one. That's a tough one. Again, I would want some more concrete details, because it's just still a little vague, and I think I understand why it has to be. The simplest answer is there a way to go directly to the person and talk about it? So what is the next step in acquiring more evidence? And now, if you have a situation where somebody's life is at risk or something like that, that's a different matter. In those cases, I would take the risk, and and repent later if it's a false report or something like that. But it kind of depends on what potentially hurt means, and what is that connection? So is it guaranteed that it's going to hurt them? If X is true, it's going to hurt them. Or is it like, if X is true, this might be hurtful? Well, you kind of want to take that one. And so what you're asking is a wisdom question in particular circumstances. And those are really hard applications to make the same way all the time. The real question is it's the orientation of the heart. Is it just because you want to believe an evil report about this person, or is it because you want to protect somebody else? Because the protective instinct is a good instinct. That's a gift from God. That's a way of loving your neighbor. And so then that becomes the question: is what is the best way to love my neighbor in this, not what is the best way to score points on the neighbor that I don't like. And if in good conscience you can say, I have to do this in the name of loving my neighbor, then yes, I would say go with humility and in faith. And if it turns out you were wrong, learn why and how, and perhaps what you should have done differently, and repent and ask forgiveness. So, yeah. So I know we're speaking kind of abstractly, so I'm answering kind of abstractly, but there's kind of 2 cents on that. Thanks for helping me to wrestle with that question, Mary. I appreciate it. So friends, thou shalt not bear false witness, because our God is truth, because everything our Jesus says is truth. That is our great hope. Every promise that Jesus gives us, he doesn't lie. And so because of that, because that is our hope, we should be people who, like our Jesus, we don't lie. Who, like our Jesus, we receive in repentant sinners and like for full forgiveness, and so that they can put the bad story behind them and begin to write a new and better story. So, in that same confidence, I will leave you today, and in that same hope that our God is truth. And so we want to be people who give the truth to others freely and consistently. So be a truth teller with your neighbor, and I'm gonna press in that direction myself. So speaking of true things, it is my hope and my prayer that the Lord blesses your work today for the rest of the day, whatever vocation and work he's put you in, and that you and I continue to ask for the Lord's help in shaping us into truth-telling people. So with that, you guys carry on in Jesus' name. Bye-bye.